Welcome here to the Gamma Project. I'm here with Peter all the way from Amsterdam. We're going to discuss some cool topics for you guys. Welcome, Peter.
Welcome, man. Welcome. Thank you.
It's only a pleasure. Thank you for taking our time to give some education and some knowledge bombs to the community. And I see you have your beautiful young bouncing boy going to add some comments and some pieces of wisdom to the conversation as well. Probably a lot more wisdom than you and I both have, Peter.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Peter, would you like to start off by asking any question that you have for our audience where we can break down some truths and some false or statements or disillusions that might currently be out there in the industry pertaining to a certain matter at hand?
Yeah, because I was thinking, I see quite a lot of people who have desk jobs. They sit a lot. They have a tendency to have a bit more back pain, and I've noticed that quite a lot of them also have diaphragmatic problems. So they have a hard time activating and using their diaphragm. And I was wondering what your view is on the importance of the diaphragm relative to low back pain or overall health in general.
Well, I think that's a very good question to ask, and I don't think people appreciate the importance of the diaphragm enough. The diaphragm is such a vital muscle within our body that not only controls posture, but very much so is involved in the control and the process or the total process within the viscera. We can include digestion, we can include detoxification, and just general chemical exchange required for ATP production. So without a fully functioning diaphragm, you'll notice that the entire physiology will be under stress. And the reason why people generally have back pain from impaired diaphragmatic performance is just, apart from the structural issues that can cause, creating compression into a fetal position, causing fascial trains to collapse within themselves, which will obviously put a lot more pressure along the lumbar vertebral discs. But apart from that obvious reason in terms of mechanics, another big reason why the lower back tends to take a lot of strain when the diaphragm isn't working well is there are deep muscles within the lower section of the lower back that are responsible for aiding the diaphragm's performance to breathing. And those muscles, as you know, being a physiotherapist yourself, Peter, are the quadratus lumborum, helping to pull the rib cage down, doing inspiration. Now, when the diaphragm's not working as well as what it should, what we may find is that our scalenes, as well as our QLs, tend to work harder than what they should to allow for better oxygen exchange to come into the body. And in doing so, they create hypertonicity. Or for you guys out there that aren't too familiar with kinesiology, excessive tonicity, tone, so excessive tone to a muscle, which in a short definition basically equates to its inability to fully flex or to fully lengthen. And that's what causes it to be almost like a stalemate position of tension, creating dysfunction to its use. So that's a possible reason as to, and a very probable, not just possible, but a highly probable reason as to why a lot of office workers that have diaphragmatic performance issues suffer from lower back pain. And then we obviously have the structural point of consideration to make there as well, whereby when you are in a seated position creating hip flexion for prolonged periods of time, the tissue that engages hip flexion generally works more in a phased manner than that of a postural manner during the action of hip flexion itself. And what we mean by that is when we engage hip flexion, it's not meant to be engaged for prolonged periods of time. It's meant to be engaged with momentary points of action to allow for greater propulsion to occur throughout our entire body, or to allow for momentary stability to occur whilst the spine might be going through transverse plane movement or action. So when we take a position or an action of our body that should be momentary, and we create a scenario whereby it's lengthened, the tissue that generally would respond in a brief period of time and has a high dramatic rate of response starts to respond in a prolonged period of time. And in essence, what this does, it causes that tissue to become less responsive in dramatic short-term response or immediate response. So although it's responding slowly for longer periods of time, in terms of its dynamic reaction, that capacity tends to start to become compromised during improper postural positions, like sitting down in front of a computer for prolonged periods of time. So in a nutshell, those are two big factors to consider why people, office workers generally have a lot of lower back pain when it comes to the diaphragm becoming impaired due to their position of work. Now, that's just structural in terms of the diaphragm, but another consideration we also need to take on board is the role that the central nervous system plays with the diaphragm. And what I mean by that is, Peter, the autonomic nervous system controls how much energy we take in and how much energy we release. And it controls this process by ways of either sympathetic or parasympathetic reaction. Now, sitting down for long periods of time is bad enough on its own, but now you accompany that with an artificial stimulus like a computer screen, which generates information for the brain at a far greater volume than it would naturally have to process information at, causing the brain to become somewhat frazzled, or it to be extreme, almost like it's having little electric shocks, having to go through its whole networking of processing to actually be able to derive solutions to problems that most of us nowadays working in computers have to come up with to the solution. So just having this call here with you now on the computer screen, the amount of pixels that are literally conducting frequencies of light are causing such a huge stimulus to the pineal gland, which will have an effect to our autonomic position and creating stress. In a nutshell, overstimulus of a computer screen, particularly if you don't get up from your desk, I think it's one thing to realize that, our situations, our current life considerations are there for the purpose that we can sustain an income, support a family and so on. So to think that you'll be able to quit your job now and not work behind computers, that's wishful thinking at its best. And we don't want to do that. We want people to have happily supported families. But everything in moderation, that really needs to stick, because even when it comes to diet, it's not about, and I really don't like the word diet because it contains the word die in it, which is a negative connotation to the whole process of being healthy. You don't want to feel like you're dying when you're trying to eat healthy. You want to feel like you're revived and full of energy. So I prefer, using terms like nutrition, eating plan, rather than diet. But even when it comes to an eating plan, if you were going to have a chocolate or a slice of cake here and there, it's not going to cause you detriment, unless you were in a severe state of metabolic impaired health, things like diabetes or excessive IBS and so on. Then you would obviously have severe symptoms come about from eating sugar or processed food. But for the most part, if you're in relatively good health, and your purpose or your goal is to try and achieve greater health, overall health, by eating better and by training more frequently, changing up the type of ways in which you train or expose your body to movement, because that's what training really is. It's just the way in which you move your body. We have different ways which you can move our body. We can move our body with weights. We can move our body on its own. We can move our body in water. We can move our body in air. But at the end of the day, training is simply put the way in which we move our bodies. And through different stimulus of training and through different stimulus of diet, we gain good health. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean that you can't have any indulgence, right? Because if you were to live your life like a hermit and never enjoy a slice of cake again, it would pretty much be and not necessarily a nice thing to have to contend with for the rest of your life. It would be bleak, very bleak, and pretty boring as well. Nothing wrong with eating a salad or having some good lean protein. However, there is sometimes a bit of an issue that if your life so having a slice of cake every once in a while can give you a little bit of joy, right? But the problem is when you start to overindulge in anything that can cause a problem. And that comes down to it comes down to the way in which we live our lives and how we work. And in particular, how we work behind artificial stimulus or a virtual reality. And that's I think that's also another contending point to take on board or to take note of as to why people could possibly be having lower back pain, apart from the postural inefficiency that they would be undertaking sitting down in front of a computer screen. The abundance of stimulus that computer screen is giving their sympathetic nervous system is overwhelming. And if you don't take breaks and have a walk every once in a while away from your computer screen, get some fresh air, and you sit down for 8, 10, 12 hours at a time, you are overstimulating your nervous system. And an overstimulated nervous system is going to cause a dysfunctional physiology. And one of the components within our physiology is our anatomy, which integrates with our physiology too. So dysfunctional physiology will cause a destructive anatomy, creating pain, which is what a lot of people feel nowadays working behind computers. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. And would you also advise people to do some diaphragmatic exercises to stretch or to use your diaphragm in general?
Yes, most definitely. There's no yes and no to that. It's a definite yes. But the process of going about, or the routine about going to increase diaphragmatic rhythm or tone, needs to be really well thought out. Because it's one thing to stretch fascia, right? But if you're not going to integrate the functionality behind a once compressed cellular fascia to a more lengthened tensile fascia, what's going to more than likely to happen is that fascia is going to reset back into its state of compression.
Yeah.
One of the reasons for this is, fascia responds 3 times faster to the environment than our nervous system does. So, which is great for us as manual therapists. We can incorporate change immediately. However, if we do not consider the integration of use of that tissue once it has had its new state of length and tone, it's just going to reset itself. So it's not just about incorporating a stretch or trying to reset the tone of your breath. I think it's a combination of the two. I feel diaphragmatic breathing is great. You get great specialists that are fantastic at their job in creating better breathing tone for most people out there, alleviating depression, anxiety, and amongst many other psychological issues that people may be undertaking. However, just as the yoga instructor might be able to stretch a person out into different positions, but may not always necessarily consider the way in which their clients are breathing, they may have momentary relief, but not progressive gain through improved diaphragmatic rhythm. So I think the two need to be incorporated. I think a good yoga instructor or a good breathing coach would incorporate both movement as well as tone of breath to encourage better diaphragmatic breathing, diaphragmatic use as a whole. But I don't think one is exclusive from the other. And just simply to say, okay, we're going to do some breathing classes. It will alleviate some tension, without a doubt. But it's whether or not it's going to provide ongoing support. That's the consideration.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Cool. Awesome.
Have you got any other questions there, Peter, that you'd like to ask?
For now, I'm good because I was really interested on your view on this particular subject, and I think I've gotten all the answers I needed and I wanted.
I gotta pose a question to you. I'm gonna reverse this
Ah.
one. I'm gonna do a reverse flash. I've been watching the flash for
Thank you.
the
Yeah.
last few days. We were speaking about a topic this morning, cardiovascular training and weight training, and what the
Mm.
right type of ratios are. And I think you sent me a post from a trainer. Was it a trainer that you sent the post from?
Yeah.
And everybody's got a little bit of a different view on the subject, and no one's necessarily wrong or necessarily right. But I think it's important to discuss it as to where cardio can be beneficial or detrimental, and what actually is the purpose of cardio, and what really is cardio in the first place. So, do you want to delve into this with me, Peter?
All right. Yeah. Okay. That's cool.
All right. So, what was just for our audience out there? What did the article suggest?
Well, it was just it was a question whether cardio or strength training is good or better for weight loss.
Okay. And what were the views of the people writing the article?
Yeah. In the end, it all depends on the goal, of course. So it depends on the history, on the status you are in. But there were some different things that were said relative to, right, if you want to lose fat, you need to do some more cardio or whatever. But in my opinion, I would go more for strength training and weight training relative to just simple cardio for weight loss, especially in the beginning when
So,
someone starting to train.
I think both can be incorporated depending on the individual. And I think we need to consider the health status of the individual at the time where they are committing to a goal. So if we have an individual that has compromised liver health or gallbladder dysfunction, and may have a compromised upper gastrointestinal tract in terms of its efficiency and be able to metabolize food and access nutrients, giving a type of person a strenuous weight training regime that causes a lot of catabolism, even though it's controlled catabolism to occur, may not necessarily initially be the best course of action to take.
True.
Right? Every time you break down muscle tissue, the liver has to work very hard to create transamination of amino acids to allow for not only recovery to occur, but also for rebalancing of certain neurotransmitters to take effect. Now, with a compromised liver, amino acid transamination or deamination may not occur effectively or efficiently. And in essence, what they will do is cause a lot of strain to the amount of protein that builds up in the kidneys, which would hamper fat loss on its own right, and let alone any other dietary restriction or whatever it might be incorporated into the plan. So we really need to consider where the person's status of health is prior to advising whether a cardio or a weight training regime is. But just to also clarify, cardiovascular training, cardiovascular, so the cardiac function with in terms of how circulation takes hold, or the vascular sheath in our body, and how they incorporate with one another to promote blood flow and energy exchange throughout the body itself. Hello, my man. Hey, big boy. Hello, do you want to talk to me? Do you want to talk about cardiovascular health? I think you have great cardiovascular health.
He's been running around all day, so his cardiovascular health is good.
You can see it. He's got good hair. I'm jealous. But cardio, in a nutshell, the way in which our mitochondria are able to respond to producing energy is very much an integral part of our cardiovascular health. And the health of our mitochondria is very much reliant on our circulation in our body and how the heart integrates toward effective and efficient circulation as well. Now, when we do weight training, right? Well, what do we do? When we commit to a weight training session, we are dramatically increasing blood flow to the periphery, away from the viscera, to the point where you actually get a pump, right? An accumulation of blood volume, which can increase hyperammonemia of certain amino acids that conjugate around the tissue that's been broken down for the purpose of recovery. right? So it's a serious amount of blood pooling. Now, if done correctly and the body's able to recover from that, those tissues will repair and become stronger, and the vascular flow will become improved toward better functioning of the muscle tissue, which has created a scenario whereby it has to adapt toward an energy need. And the energy need is much greater to that specific muscle tissue than it may have been if you were to do a steady state cardio session. In contrast, so although you have probably more calories burned throughout a cardiovascular session, not necessarily, but possibly, because of the quantity of muscle tissue used as opposed to a arms hypertrophy session, just to compare the two. So you may not burn as many calories during the arms hypertrophy session, but you are definitely creating more of a local effect and a local need for adaptation of blood cells, vascular cells to integrate toward improved cardiovascular function. So in a nutshell, to think that cardiovascular training is merely walking on a treadmill or going outside for a run is rather a shortfall within the industry to an understanding of naivety, really, because cardio function improves if the body moves. And if you are going to move the body with a gross amount of stress toward a specific plane, the vascular function to that tissue within that plane of motion, or then the fascia that integrates movement in that plane of motion, will improve if the person is healthy, right? If the person isn't healthy, however, and you're trying to induce these changes, you're more than likely going to overstress the system and create an excessive immune response, possibly dampening the immune system and making the client or the person, the trainee, vulnerable to all sorts and types of horrible infection. So I think, to really truly summarize whether cardio and weight training are good for fat loss or good for muscle gaining, and you shouldn't do cardio if you're trying to grow muscle, that's also another point of contention to consider, because technically, if we consider cardiovascular training that whereby you're not lifting an external load, training which does not have an external load imposed on by one's biotensegrity. If we consider that to be cardiovascular training and it's done at a lower threshold of intensity as opposed to weight training, then I would say that it's actually vitally important to incorporate it even when you are trying to build muscle. And the reason for that is when we train with weights, we do not necessarily incorporate multiple and dynamic planes of motion during weight training itself. Even when we do a squat, which is probably one of the more versatile and functional movements that is performed in a gym, apart from those who do Olympic lifting, you're still predominantly moving in a sagittal plane of motion. However, when you go along do cardiovascular training, whereby you actually create propulsion of gaits, you have to incorporate elements of both a greater amounts of stability and mobility to occur in micro components. And this involves a component from the central nervous system to integrate both MRF and PMRF, which are two acronyms that are defined as mesencephalon reticular formation, which is basically the way in which your eyes are able to receive information, process it through the midbrain, and derive a strategy or orchestrate a strategy. And it does that. It creates that strategy with integration and communication along pontomedullary receptors, which are found along the spinal column. All right, and those respond to other receptors that allow for either facilitation of sympathetic fibers to occur or parasympathetic fibers to occur. Now, all of this is big fancy words, but what it boils down to is when you go for a walk after weight training, you in essence are encouraging your nervous system to take on its natural process of stability and mobility once again, making sure that you create better equilibrium or reinstall equilibrium to both hemispheres of the body and the brain, or orchestrating a strategy for improved movement itself. So to just do weight training for the purpose of building muscle without taking into account strategy that one needs to incorporate after catabolism has occurred during a hypertrophy program is negligent, because what you may find is that you become more dominant in one hemisphere more so than the other, causing structural imbalance. So this is also, but then one also needs to consider the intensity of the cardio that's done as well. So once you finish an intense weight training session, going for a high intensity interval bout may not necessarily be the best idea if your objective is to reinstall hemispherical symmetry to the nervous system after engaging a hypertrophy protocol itself. So I don't feel that either a weight training workout or a cardiovascular workout can be predefined as being either beneficial or detrimental to either the goal of fat loss or muscle gain, unless we determine first and foremost the status of health of the clients, as well as the outcome to that session and what type of recovery needs to be implemented toward regaining structural balance and control. Now, doing more calories off the idea behind cardio training comes through the notion that if you do more cardio, you're going to burn more calories and not have enough supply for your muscles to be able to access amino acids for recovery and growth. I can't see, unless you're doing extreme bouts of high intensity interval training, I have to disagree with that notion. If you are committing to a bout of cardio of 20 minutes, or even up to 30 minutes at a time at a moderate intensity, not letting your heart rate elevate above 145 beats per minute, which is still a relatively good heart rate to burn fat at, as well as reinstall balance in the body, the likelihood that you're going to severely deplete your amino acid stores for the purpose of anabolism is very unlikely, to say the least. I think that type of thinking takes the economics approach to bodybuilding or to body composition training, and it's flawed. It really is flawed, because the body is far more complex than simply what you put in is what you get out. It's what happens what happens when you put something in the body, what's happening in the body, that will determine what you actually get out. It's the machine which you are putting the fuel into that is important, rather than the quantity of the fuel. And so I don't know what you feel about this, Peter, but I don't believe that one should compartmentalize a strategy for a given result, not taking on board all the factors.
No, you have to, because I wish it were that simple, that you just had one program you give to everyone and everyone gets the same result. I wish it was that easy, but that's not the way everyone's made, and everyone's different. So why put a protocol on a certain goal, such as fat loss or something?
I completely agree, and it's very important to remember is, apart from us being very different in terms of our genetic structure, we're always changing. Our exposure to, the environment's always changing. Unless you're living on a terrestrial planet, we generally go through seasons. And just through the natural process of change of season, so do our genes change in how they express reaction to the environment, because there's an epigenetic reaction, i.e., the environment creating change to how genes are creating a response within our body to cope with that environment in the first place. So, and then we have another scenario whereby we create artificial environments for ourselves, not even a natural environment. And everybody's artificial environment is so very different today, let alone their natural environment. So there's so many things to consider. And I think it's not necessarily about creating one strategy and that's the only strategy you ever create. I think it's very important to create ongoing developmental strategy as the body changes, listening and also analyzing, not just going on subjective, although subjective understanding of what your body is telling you is very, very important. It can sometimes tell you what the objective parameters don't tell you. So it's very important to listen to your subjective inner voice, as well as create analytics to which you can actually compare objective findings that your body's trying to tell you. I utilize glucose, as you know, heart rate variability, and body temperature, which are very simple biometrics to incorporate, but they tell you a hell of a lot of whether someone is responding positively or possibly destructively to a given plan in question. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I always find that topic to be quite interesting to talk about, purely from the matter that you're taking the old school mentality that's been passed on through generations, whereby if you want to lose weight, you go do more cardio and less weights. And if you want to build muscle, you do less cardio and more weights. And although in its simplicity it might seem possible or possibly correct, it's really flawed because it doesn't take into consideration multiple factors of the individual, or whether the individual is starting from or coming from, for that matter.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with that. Yeah.
Peter, you've been working on the Gamma project for about 2 months, 3 months, almost 3 months, isn't it?
Almost 3 months. Yeah.
Yeah. And how are you finding it so far?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's just what you just said before, that you know the subjective stuff. You know how your body feels, but now you also have the numbers and glucose and heart rate variability, how your body actually reacts to the stressors you impose to your body, instead of that you just think, hey, this is good for me, I feel good, and that the numbers say it's going in the wrong direction. And that's really interesting to notice and to experience, for me as a physiotherapist as well, just to see how all the different systems interconnect and how you can influence the whole system by something as simple as leaving out zucchini or leaving out tomatoes or something, or gluten. And that's really interesting.
No, I'm glad that you're finding it to be informative. It's very important that we're continually striving to educate ourselves about what our bodies are telling us, rather than just being advocated what to do. Avocation never serves value because there's always flaws in it. But when you become educated to a process, you become empowered. And I'm glad that you've become empowered through this process. And thank you for taking the time just to give the viewers out there an opportunity of insight toward very important topics.
Awesome, you're welcome. Thank you as well for your time.
Very welcome. Have a great day,
Awesome.
Peter.